What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. I am your host, Redkacheek, and this week is the Cognizant Classic. Just like last week or the last couple of weeks, this will be a dual stream. So this will be the audio version of this, and then a video version you can find on YouTube, and also it's published on Spotify, which is cool. So I know a lot of people just listen on Apple Podcasts, and that's totally fine. So you can listen to this, or you can go find the video on YouTube, because I'll be walking through some of the tools as we kind of talk through this. But we'll do my best to talk through it thoroughly. A couple of housekeeping notes. So fantasygolfbag.com, the last week for the Welcome Back FGB promo is this week. So February 28th. What's today? The 25th. Was that Friday? It's a good question. Let's see. Yeah, Friday. So if you haven't already, I mean, we have a lot of good free tools. I think they're good for like when I started in DFS. If these were free, this would be a fantastic head start. But working very hard on some premium tools, and some guys have already started like putting in their own unique twists and requests, and we've kind of aided to create those. So definitely check it out. You can go to fantasygolfbag.com. I don't push too many things. I'm just terrible at doing that, but fantasygolfbag.com, and there's no promo code needed. If you just go, sign up, you can sign up for a free account. If you sign up for pro, we got weekly, monthly, or yearly, and they are all discounted up until the 28th. So definitely check it out. And then you can hop in the Discord and chat with us, and we can chat through things at like, I think it was 12:30 at night last night. We're talking through Le Golf National in France, and how there's a correlation there between some of the winners, or some of the guys that have played well, and some of the guys that should play well here or have played well here. So, of course, you can just hop into the Discord and talk Le Golf National for the 4 players that have substantial or like some decent sample size. But I think that's the last one. We did launch a new tool yesterday, the Approach IQ. I don't know if I'll go through it. I might pull it up here, depending on the players that we look at. But you can definitely check that out. That was a fun tool to make, and then it was a pretty fun tool to tinker with now as we look through specific ranges, approaches, and specific types of approaches. So with that being said, I am going to share the fantasygolfbag.com. And then let me change this. And then we got a full one. Woo! We're taking the morning coffee, though. I did not get this in last night, so it's 7 o'clock in the morning right now. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk through the golf course. This is a unique twist. So I think there's actually some interesting things to talk about the golf course, more than other events, and certainly more than past years at the Honda, with what they changed last year and this year, and then what we're going to look at here in the Course Preview Pro tool. So again, just PGA tools. I moved the Pro tools up to the top. The free tools are here down at the bottom still. There is a Course Preview that's free, but the Pro has a bit more data that I like to look at least. All right, so as we look at this, we'll talk through the winners, lead-in form, stats, and all that stuff. I think just generally speaking, you guys are here. You know this golf course is super tough. The first thing I want to point out is when you're looking at the hole-by-hole scores over here on the right-hand side, you will see that the return to par per round is minus 0.9 strokes. This is extremely low relative to the past years. So actually we can go pull that up really quick. So last year they changed it from a par 70 to a par 71. And you can see here, if we look at scoring, last year was minus 0. So this is on the course comparison data, which you can have access to. And you can look through all the different stats and kind of compare. But this is just a really easy way to visually see this. So you can see last year, the yardage hasn't changed. It was par 71 last year, which makes it easier. Number 10 was moved to a par 5. All the prior years have been a par 70. So it's just literally one shot easier, assuming the yardage didn't change, which it didn't. In fact, the average par 5 yardage was actually less last year than any of the prior years. So my point is, you can see in that chart, it's minus 0.9 strokes per round. Sounds easy. Like, honestly, that's like Mexico Open scoring. If you look through, and it was easier weather. But my point is, if you look through all the prior years, typically we see, 2023, they played almost half a shot over par. In 21, 22, and 20, it played over a shot over par. And in fact, in 2020, it played almost 2 shots over par. So I think it can be a little bit misleading. We have to be accurate for like what the actual course is currently, which is a par 70. So this is reflecting last year's scoring. I think that eventually comes down and flattens out. If I pull in all the old data, all of a sudden now it looks like this golf course is going to play 1.5 strokes over par. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. So I just wanted to point that out. Return to par minus almost a shot under par ain't going to happen. Perfect weather, really good field, maybe. But the par 71 definitely affects that scoring. So just pay attention to that. Expect +1, half a shot over par to +1, 1.5 shots over par to be the scoring average for the field. The scoring distribution. So this is from last year. You can see like hole 10, really just the par 5s, 3 and 10 and 18 played under par. Every other hole basically played a little bit over or a little bit under, right around par. The par 3s on the back 9, 15 and 17 played almost 0.2 shots over par. So the main takeaway here is keep in mind that last year they shifted the par from a par 70 to par 71. That affects the scoring, obviously, if they don't change anything. Because the length on 10 didn't change. They moved tee boxes up and down a little bit, but like now it's just 1 shot easier relative to par. They guys were making 4s before and it was a par. Now it's a 4, it's a birdie. So the other thing I wanted to quickly point out to is if you scroll to the bottom, you can kind of see that scoring anyways, but like the coloring helps a little bit. So like hole 1 played a little bit under par, hole 3, hole 10, hole 18. So really pretty flat across the course. There's not a lot to be gained except for on the par 5s. So keep that in mind as well. The par 5s is where you make your bread, and the par 3s you hold on because you're probably, if you play the par 3s over par this week, you're doing good. And then the other par 4s are really just you try to get a birdie here and there. There's some shorter par 4s, but everything's treacherous. So long spiel there on the hole by hole stuff, but I wanted to point that out because it is important, especially as you look through this. Oh, this course is easy. Return to par, almost a shot under par. That aligns with definitely last week for the Mexico Open, where the cut was -3, I think. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and jump into the rest of the golf course, and then we'll talk through the players in the field. So the last 5 winners here, again, you can kind of see how the scoring has trended. But last year, Austin Eckroat at -17, Chris Kirk -14, Sepp Straka -10, Matt Jones -12. He went to live. And then Sungjae Im at -6 in 2020. Definitely tougher conditions in 2020, which we saw with it playing about 2 strokes over par. It's a par 71, 7,100 yards, Bermuda through and through. Everyone will talk about Bermuda splits. I don't hate it. Bermuda is a tricky grass to chip on and putt on. It really is. I think there's a skill in reading Bermuda greens. I grew up on Bermuda, so it's kind of, I read greens decent. Like it's kind of second nature at this point, reading grain with the actual undulations. Everything is accentuated. Grain tends to go down the hill. You'll hear things like grain grows towards the sun, or grows where the water flows. That's where it goes. Grain grows where the water flows, generally speaking, unless they haven't cut it for like 3 days. But that's what gets people, is basically whatever you see on like bent grass, if it breaks a cup on Bermuda, it's going to break a little bit more. How much more? It just depends on the slope and how fast the greens are. But that's usually the tricky part with Bermuda greens. As far as like chipping, I will say Bermuda chipping is extremely difficult if you're not used to it, especially if you start to get into the grain lies. So you'll see some wonky around the green numbers here. Some of it's rough, which honestly I'd prefer to chip out of the rough around this golf course than on the tighter lies with the Bermuda. But it is tricky. So looking at Bermuda splits is not a bad idea this week, and I dropped that in the Discord yesterday. So you can go find that full sheet of Bermuda splits. It has approach data, around the green data, putting obviously, and then scoring like birdies. So average par 3 about 200 yards. Basically, there's two 175 to 200, and there's two 200 to 225. So it's an even split, but you have two in each of those categories. Par 4, 430, par 5 is 540. So let's talk about actual stats. So as you scroll down in this middle section, you'll see a lot of red, a lot of red. So we know scoring is difficult. These charts all incorporate all the past years. So this is, again, the return to par we just talked about for scoring was just last year because it's a par 71. All of these metrics are literally the actual course for the last, 10, 12, 15 years. So this is very representative of what the players will have to deal with. Like I said, if they move to a par 71, they can move it to a par 75. The holes are still the same. They still got to play the same holes. So driving accuracy is down. Driving distance is about the same. So this was interesting. I pulled this chart up last year. I'll probably tweet it out later today. But people think about the PGA National course as maybe not less than driver, but definitely an accuracy golf course. And then, there's some truth to that. But there's a lot of drivers to be hit on this golf course. 7,100 yards is not necessarily short. There's some shorter holes for sure. But when you look through what guys have done on this golf course, basically, number one, they hit irons off the tee. And then outside of one and the par 5s, there are 8 holes that majority of the players hit driver. 8 holes. That's half the holes, basically. More than half if you exclude the par 3s. So keep that in mind. I think driving is actually a very underrated, and I believe Pat Mayo talked about this, and I'm pretty sure we've talked about that with Axis before. Driving on this golf course, off the tee, not so much. Like the actual stat strokes gained off the tee, not so much. But driving coming into this week, like you got to be a good driver of the golf ball. Because you're going to have to hit a lot of drivers. There are some probably 5 tee shots where water is in play. Most of the other shots with water are approach shots. But I did want to point that out. I think people get really sucked into the approach, which is obviously important. But there's a lot of drivers to be hit here and a lot of water. Rough is going to cause some issues into these greens, even if you have wedges. So we'll see how that plays out as far as like there was some rain yesterday and maybe it softened up the course a bit. But drivers, there's 8 of them, about 8 that players hit. The majority of players hit throughout this golf course. And then the other ones are honestly 3-wood. So like arguably it's not that much different. Guys, you can still spray a 3-wood. But driving accuracy is down. Missed fairway penalty is down. I think that just alludes to the scoring. So when I see missed fairway penalty down and driving accuracy down, this golf course, you're not going to make a lot of birdies. You can kind of see that in the birdie or better rate here. Birdie or better rate is about 5% lower than the tour average. So sometimes missing the fairway is a penalty, but if you can't score really, you can't really gain an advantage from the fairway. That's where that missed fairway penalty comes into play. So yes, I want my guys hitting fairways. Even though there's not a big missed fairway penalty, I need them to hit more than the field average for sure. Distance penalty is easier because everyone's hitting it pretty much the same spot. Let's see here. Green regulation is down. That's the really tricky part. I think if you look at past winners, green regulation here is just under 60%. If you're scrambling here consistently, like I said, there's not a lot of birdies to be made outside the par 5s. So if you're scrambling on 40% of the holes, you're going to have a tough time making up the shots on the par 5s. You're going to end up bleeding off some shots you probably didn't pick up on the par 5s. So green regulation is a big one this week. And we'll look at the approach buckets here in just a second. Let's see. Green regulation is down a little bit from the fairway. It's down a little bit from the rough. They're tougher greens to hit. Most of these are elevated. In years past, it's been, firmer with some wind. It is a tough golf course. But keep in mind, guys are going to have to hit drivers to get it in the right positions, they cannot rely on hitting irons. There's no weakness. We'll look at that with the lead-in stats here in just a second. So, and then this just alludes to the scoring. So birdie or better at 16%, like I said, it's quite low. It's 5% lower than the tour average. And likewise, bogey or worse is about 4% higher than the tour average. Makes sense. It's a tough golf course into the greens and on the greens. So in this second section, we'll finish up talking about the golf course. You can see here in this left chart the difference between the top 25 guys, the top 10 finishers, and kind of where their strokes were gained relative to the field to see kind of how they differentiated. Again, don't confuse this with lead-in stats, but it's just a nice representation of what, where was the opportunity to be had on this golf course. And honestly, off the tee, like I said, is not an opportunity because everybody's hitting it to the same spot, but it is an opportunity because you have to drive it well. Like you could drive it perfectly all week. You're not going to gain that much off the tee relative to the field, but it's very, very important that you drive the ball well. And the reason I say that is because if you're hitting it to 280 or 290 off the tee, everyone's kind of hitting it to that distance anyways. So like this, there's no opportunity to hit, pot guider it out there 330, 350 outside of a few par fives. So like I said, off the tee is very important, even though it doesn't say you can gain much. I need my players to be good off the tee this week. Approach is very high. You can see a huge gap between the guys that made the cut or finished in the top 25, and then even a bigger, even a more of a gap into the top 10. So approach, no surprise there. Around the green, there's not much to be gained. It's just tough, and guys are not going to be hitting it that close from the rough, especially if the greens are firm. And then putting is the last one. There's a big gap in putting between the guys that made the cut and the top 25 and top 10 finishers. So like I said, Bermuda putting is something good to look at, and you can find that in the Discord. But all in all, if you look at this chart, basically it boils down to approach and putting. But like I said, do not overlook driving, especially lead-in driving. Guys can gain a lot of strokes off the tee coming into this week, and they can't do it here. Like Rory couldn't gain a lot off the tee here. But he's a great driver, and he's been gaining a lot, obviously. So that's an advantage in my mind. So this middle chart is basically looking at the finishers field versus the winner. So you can see driving accuracy is about the same, and even driving distance. Like the top 10 finishers in the field is a 4-yard difference. So like I said, you just can't gain much off the tee, but I still need my guys to be above the field average in hitting fairway, basically just total driving. As silly as that sounds, I want guys hitting it at least to the field distance off the tee and hitting more than the field's fairways, which is about 60%. Green regulation goes up. That's really the difference maker there, but you still have to hit in the fairway to get to that point. Proximity right around 36 feet. Even that's not even an advantage. You got 38 feet for the field, 36 feet for the top 10, 34 feet for the winner. So again, proximity is not even a big deal. I just need my guys to be in play the entire round, 4 straight days. Off the tee in play, on the green, hitting greens in regulation, make your birdies on the par fives, shoot 4 under, shoot 2 or 3, 4 under a day, and you're going to be in pretty good shape, if you shoot 12 under par here. All right, approach buckets. It's pretty spread out. Consider the par threes, which I don't have a toggle here to take out the par threes. I've kicked that around. I think it would be valuable. Although, they count towards the course, so I guess it still should be considered. But it is nice to see, what are the other holes looking like? But like I said, 175 to 200 and 200 to 225 are the par threes. Most of these approaches are going to come from 150 to 200 yards. So keep that in mind. You can use the Approach IQ tool to nail that down. You can even include par threes only, or, from the fairway. If you want to, maybe you're getting risky, you want to see what the guys do from the rough. But approach distances here, assuming these guys, this is for the field, so it's not assuming they hit the fairway. But again, I'm trying to think through, what do I want for my players? I want guys that have been driving the ball well, really doing everything well. And then specifically, if I want to nail it down, I want guys good with their mid iron. So 150 to 200 yards. And that's about it. Good putters prevail. So as we go down into this middle section, this is the past winners and lead-in stats. I won't spend too much time here, but you will see there's a lot of green. Austin Eckroat, green all the way down the board. Chris Kirk, green all the way down the board. Sepp Straka, green all the way down the board. They literally were gaining on the field in all strokes gained categories, green or regulation, proximity, birdie or better, bogey or worse. They were better than the field in their prior, 6 or 8 events. So a different sample size here. Like Austin Eckroat had 26 rounds, Sepp Straka had 32 rounds. But you can see there's a lot of consistency even as we keep going back. All these winners were basically losing on one category at worst and doing well here. Actually, around the green was the worst. Like Justin Thomas was gaining across the board except for around the green. Adam Scott gaining in every category except around the green leading into this event. Same with Sung J M. So it's interesting. Like around the green's kind of the outlier of not mattering for lead-in form. It doesn't hurt to be good at it, but everything else you need to be excelling at. I will point out Keith Mitchell was the outlier in 2019. He was lower than the field and around the green, lower in putting, but then he got to Bermuda. So, maybe consider that a little bit. And then bogey or worse was above the field average, which isn't good. But everybody else, man, you go all the way back to Adam Scott. Padraig Harrington sucked. Not sure how he won, but that is wild. Everyone else, very good through the bag, all strokes gained categories. Don't get too cute here. Obviously, you got to go down the board and make some decisions, but let's not deviate from the ball striking narrative because it is very, very, very important here. I don't see any way you can really fake it. There's been a handful of guys that just kind of they found it this week. But stay on track. Ball striking, strokes gained, spectrum, all the way down through the bag, and then green or regulation, birdie or better, bogey or worse. All those stats, I want my players to be checking most of them. This is the field history. I'll just quickly look at the best top 10 finishers, and then we'll move on to the players. So Shane Lowry has 3 top 10s. Really good course history here. Keith Mitchell has a win and 2 other top 10s. Billy Horschel, there's actually quite a few guys with good top 10s. Billy Horschel, Ricky Fowler, Gary Woodland, all with 3 top 10s. Some of these guys go back further. So like Billy Horschel's back through 2016. He's done better. Like last year was a T9. Ricky Fowler's top 10s came from 2019 back to 2016. And then Woodland is kind of spread out there. He did miss the cut here last year. And then I think Russell Henley, who's going to be pretty popular this week, he has 2 top 10s, T8 and T3 in 2020 and 2021. I thought he would have, I think his course history back further was good. Like when he first got on tour in 2011 or 2012, I think he had a couple good years in a row here. But he does fit the bill. Good Bermuda putter, good irons, decent driver. And then Daniel Berger, which we'll talk about. I think that's it for the golf course. That was a long-winded preview, but it is important because this is a fun event. It's going to be brutal when you wake up at 8 a.m. on Thursday and you see guys ejecting 4 over par or 2 over par through 2. But it is important to look through what specifically should I be focusing on this week? Obviously, ball striking. I think the advantage is really just focusing in on off the tee a little bit more than you would otherwise, and then dialing in the approaches. So with that being said, what are we at here? 23 minutes. Let's quickly jump to the approach IQ, and we can look at those 2 buckets really quick. And then obviously, I'm not going to go through all these tools, but for the pro tools, you have Spectrum, which was very valuable last week. And then the Stat Model Pro, which I'm not going to look at, but we'll do the rolling stats. So let's do Approach IQ really quick. So we just talked about those approach buckets. So 150 to 200 yards. We can kind of do fairway. We can do par 3. So honestly, you could do it either way. Let's just do fairway. We're going to look at 150 to 200 yards. And I need to push this update. So the newest update for Approach IQ ranks and has percentiles for all of these. So that'll be helpful just to quickly eyeball the rankings in the field. But you can see here, so 150 to 175. There's some limited sample size, but actually Jacob Bridgman, Molinari, Hoshino, Nick Hardy, pretty good. Nick Hardy's always pretty good. Actually, Nick Hardy's good in the 175 to 200 bucket as well. Again, limited sample size. We can go back and try to get a little bit more. And that's proximity. I mean, honestly, I think I would use the broader bucket of green and regulation. So what that would look like is somehow Carl Phillips must be off of last week with the Mexico Open, but Danny Willett looks good. Molinari, Brian Campbell, of course, Bridgman, Spieth, Goddard, Victor Perez, and Nick Hardy again. That's the 150 to 175 guys that have the highest green and regulation rate from those distances. Again, a very important range to be hitting greens, even if it's not that close. These greens aren't that big. It gives them a very good chance of basically staying level par, and then they can go pick up the shots on the par fives. And then really quickly, 175 to 200, we got Toasty, Alejandro Toasty at 6,700. Will Chandler, surprisingly, these guys don't have a ton of shots. They've only played a handful of events. Still pretty good. Like, honestly, if you hit 22 shots, which is what Will Chandler has, I think you would get a pretty good idea if you were decent or bad at that yardage. Cristobal Del Solar, Charlie Hoffman, Nate Lashley, Bud Colley, Gary Woodland, and Nikolai Hogard. Nikolai Hogard, pretty good in 150 to 175. I think you got to go back to Hogard. But that's pretty much it. You can look at return to par scores, so like guys that actually make the most birdies, strokes gained approach for those distances, etc. So I'm not going to carry too many of those guys over into the rolling stats, but let's go ahead and hop into the rolling stats, and we'll talk through kind of the pricing and the players that we think should provide the best bang for our buck this week. All right. So as you can see here, this is the rolling stats. This is the free version. Very powerful, actually. It makes it nice to jump in and quickly see trends over the last 12, last 8, and last 4 events. So we got Russell Henley. We'll just talk through the 10Ks really quick. Let me clear out my favorites. That way we can add the new favorites. So we have Russell Henley at 10.7, Shane Lowry at 10.5. Let me see really quick. One second. I just want to double check. Yeah, so like super thin on the 10K side. I want to make sure I didn't exclude somebody that didn't came from the DP World Tour or something. Yeah, so we got Russell Henley, Shane Lowry, 10.7, 10.5. A bigger group in the 9Ks, which we'll just include. That'll make the most sense. So if we're talking through like off the tee and approach, and obviously the putting we can look at later. Some of the guys that stand out obviously is Sepp Straka at 9,400. Good history here. Really good recent form. Daniel Berger at 9,900 is kind of in the same boat. I will say it's interesting for Russell Henley. His biggest weakness, and again, it kind of matters on the events he's played because he's played some of the bigger events, which had the better players and longer courses. If you think about playing Torrey Pines, Russell Henley off the tee is not good. I think I would knock that down a little bit here because I think a big contributor for his off the tee is his distance. And like we talked about in the course preview, the distance isn't to be gained here. It's really, hitting it to the field average and hitting more fairways than the field. So I think this would actually be a place where he would be advantageous off the tee, even though it shows he's been bad, if that makes sense. So like off the, strokes gained off the tee, you can gain it in 2 ways, really, distance or accuracy. You do both well, you gain a lot. If you do one of those well, it depends on how poorly it is, you can gain or be slightly negative, etc. So I think Russell Henley's contributor there is just distance. So yeah, Daniel Berger. I think Taylor Pendrith is worth going back to. He grades out great off the tee. I think his irons are actually trending in the right direction. This shows they've been flat. But if we looked at Spectrum, which we looked at a couple weeks ago, he pops in our Spectrum data. So Pendrith is a really good option. I like that at 9,500. Sepp Straka makes a lot of sense there. And the rest of these guys, honestly, the irons haven't been that good. Denny McCarthy's irons have been okay. The rest of this 9K range is really off the tee and not great with the irons. So this would probably be where I would go favorite Minwoo Lee, Keith Mitchell, Ben An, the guys that have the best driving stats kind of in the last few cycles, the last few rolling stats, and then go to the approach IQ and go pull them specifically. We can kind of just do that live really quick. So I got Minwoo Lee. I'll try to describe this for the people listening on the podcast. I'll even include Davis Thompson because he looks exactly the same. He's just 8,900 instead. So like when we talk about we need guys that are good with their irons. For some reason, Minwoo Lee, Keith Mitchell, Ben An, and Davis Thompson, their irons are mediocre to bad, at least in this field. They're at least below the field average. Off the tee is fantastic. Everybody is green in this range. So what I would do is I would go to the approach IQ. They will carry over, obviously, because I selected these guys that I'm interested in playing, and now I want to focus in on 150 to 175. It's pretty easy to group because their salary is about the same. But we can look at green and regulation and do show favorites, and you can see here, Minwoo Lee from 150 to 175 has not been good. Green and regulation at 56%. It's not good. And even below 175 to 200, it's green, but you can see how it's worse than Keith Mitchell, worse than Davis Thompson. So this would be interesting. I would say Benny An is actually going to be the under-owned play out of that, and he's been more consistent from these two ranges than those other, Minwoo Lee and Keith Mitchell. Minwoo Lee's been pretty good, 175 to 200, as Keith Mitchell has as well. But if we're looking through this, I think Davis Thompson stands out, even though his approach numbers aren't good. And then Benny An stands out actually as really excelling in that 150 to 200 yard range. You could do it by strokes gained approach. None of these guys are gaining, which makes sense because they're not good in the field. Gaining a little bit. Keith Mitchell gaining a little bit, 175 to 200. And then we can do like return to par score. This is interesting. Yeah. So Minwoo Lee's actually playing over par from the 150 to 175 in his last 8 events. That's not good for this week. I think Keith Mitchell is the guy, right? If you're looking at this and you see, I think Benny An is sneaky. I'm going to play Benny An based off of this alone. I think Davis Thompson is probably worth being in your pool. But if we're going to kind of nitpick the 9K range, especially this low end, Keith Mitchell, obviously off the tee looks good. His approach numbers don't look good. Why is that? And then I go focused in on 150 to 175 and 175 to 200. He's playing under par in both of those ranges over the last 8 events. Can do fairway. Fairway, he's even par, 150 to 175. He's still playing half a shot under par, 175 to 200. So yeah, Keith Mitchell, the stud from 175 to 200. That's crazy. Davis Thompson's still doing pretty good in that range as well. So he's struggling in that shorter range. But yeah, I know we went kind of on a tangent there, but that's a good use case for approach IQ to kind of nail down, man, these guys are checking the box in off the tee. And that's obviously a good thing. Approach is mediocre. It's not bad, but which of these guys maybe is doing better in those specific ranges? And that's a fantastic way to go about it. So hopefully that helped. That helped me for sure. So Keith Mitchell is the guy I'm going to play out of that low 9K range. Interesting. And then Benny An, like I said, I think Benny An just people assume he's bad with the irons, and he's actually not that bad in those specific ranges, which makes sense. All right, so going down into the 8K range, there's a few better players that have good recent form. Michael Kim, Kurt Kitayama grades out really well in the Stat Model Pro, Spectrum data, Approach IQ. I'm pretty sure I looked at him yesterday in the Approach IQ data. Kitayama is an interesting one. And then we had a nice tip from, who was that? A Walla Kid, I think, in the Discord, that Le Golf National. I kind of talked about that at the beginning of the show. Was a nice corollary golf course to this one. And I believe I need to go fact check him really quick. Kitayama, I think, won or finished well at that event. So let's go check it really quick. Le Golf National. Yeah, so he's only played there once. This is a DP World Tour event, and they played there for the Olympics. So not a lot of guys in this field that have played there, but it was worth, mentioning, and I appreciate that. The 2019 French Open, Kitayama finished fourth. And if you guys remember from the Olympics or from the Ryder Cup, the Le Golf National is very tight, a lot of water, still plenty of drivers to be hit. So I agree with him. I think that actually is a pretty good comp course from the actual playing standpoint. And actually the scoring and the distance was similar too. So yeah, I think he was pretty much spot on. And I will say really quick, I forgot to do this, and he'll bitch at me if I don't. I'm going to give a hat tip to Mr. Rapp. He led me down a good path last week. So on the podcast, I talked about Jaeger. I'll try to make this quick, otherwise it doesn't apply this week. So like talked about on the podcast last week, Jaeger been bad off the tee, and he had. Strokes gained showed him negative, quarter of a shot or something, or 0.15 over his last, 20 rounds or 24 rounds. Well, Rapp pointed out to me that the Spectrum data said otherwise. So I looked at it, and sure enough, Spectrum had him positive. And we ended up playing Jaeger, and he played pretty good. So I want to give a shout out to Rapp, because I would have definitely faded Jaeger just quickly off of looking at the strokes gain data for off the tee. I kind of had it already in my mind. Didn't want to go down that path of looking specifically at Jaeger. So I appreciate Rapp doing that. And again, that just goes to the point of, sometimes you can dig into these guys or use some of these tools, and you'll start to see, I know he's been bad, but maybe he hasn't been as bad as it shows in the strokes gain data. So thanks to Rapp, and we'll continue with this show. But fantastic use of the Spectrum data to kind of get us back on track with Jaeger, finding out that his off the tee was actually skewed a little bit based on some outliers that Spectrum data kicks out. All right, into the rest of the 8K range, we have Cameron Young down here, who's been a popular tip. He's another one I would use Approach IQ for, exactly the same exact thing. Like, very bad approach, but like now I can fine tune this. You can do this with Stat Model Pro a little bit, but now I can fine tune these guys that are good off the tee, and maybe I want to focus in on that 150 to 200 yard range. I'm going to spend a good amount of time later today doing that, but Cameron Young's another example. Approach is bad in the rolling stats because it has been bad, but has it been bad because it's been 125 to 150 or 75 yards to 100 yards? Where has he been losing all those strokes? Maybe 175 to 200, he's fantastic, and he just hasn't had the opportunity to gain many strokes there. So another good example there. I will take a closer look on Young. Max Grieserman down here. Ben Griffin, surprised Ben Griffin's stats aren't better. He's playing really good golf. I like him here quite a bit at 8,500. He is 40 to 1. Good week last week. Again, this is a golf course I think he's actually longer than you think, but this is a good golf course for him to excel with his irons and his mid iron specifically. This is a really good option for him. He seems pretty level headed. So when the courses get tough, I do like Ben Griffin here. Talked about Michael Kim, Kurt Kitayama. See what I want to do with Kim. I don't know. He's played the easy courses okay. I guess he played the Genesis at Torrey okay, but this would be one of those I might pump my brakes and just see if he can. Maybe he's got something going, but this would be one of those weeks where I would probably jump off somebody like that's played well, but on easier tracks of late. And that's probably it for the 8K range. never hate Eckroat. He gets a big price jump this week, but Eckroat's fine. He's been pretty much average across all those different stats. All right, down into the 7K range we go. Billy Horschel, the opposite of some of those top price guys. Approach has been fantastic. Off the tee has been poor. I think you should definitely consider Horschel, especially in Florida on Bermuda. Alex Smalley at 7,900. Let's see. Luke Clanton makes his return at 7,700. He's a Florida State guy. I think he actually grew up in West Palm Beach or in Jupiter or somewhere down there. They keep calling him a hometown. He's a hometown kid or something. I don't know. But he definitely is comfortable playing in Florida and on Bermuda. So you gotta keep the pedal down on Luke Clanton, 7,700. He didn't make the cut at the Farmers. I think he missed the cut. And that would have got him his tour card. So he has one more chance this week. If he makes the cut, he gets his tour card if he wants to take it. He's obviously still in school at Florida State, but we'll see how that goes. Taylor Moore, I think we got him wrong last week on the easier tracks. I was talking to Sam Sherman, who's very sharp as well. And I think people in the Discord were on the same mindset. But like Taylor Moore on the courses that are tough, where scoring opportunities aren't as vastly available, Taylor Moore kind of holds his own. He's a kind of a good, steady guy, I guess, where he just hangs around par, makes a couple birdies, makes a couple bogeys. But he does that on the easy courses too, which is what kind of happened last week. So I think Taylor Moore, this is a good spot for him to come back to. He's at 7,600. Gary Woodland, like that quite a bit. I won't spend too much time on that one. Makes a lot of sense. Good course history, good stats leading in. As far as like anybody in this field, probably the most consistent off the tee and approach, and now coming to a course that he likes quite a bit. Let's see here. Anybody else in this 7K range that stands out? Hogard, he can't do much off the tee here, like we talked about, and the same with Jake Knapp. Both of them are in this category for the last 4 events in these rolling stats, but approach has been good. And honestly, if you look at Hogard in Spectrum data or the approach IQ data, he's been very good in that longer, it's not long for him, longer range, 175 to 200, and 200 to 225 even. So Nikolai Hogard and Jake Knapp, I think, are worth keeping in your player pool. I think I would be more comfortable if we're thinking through playing, like building out a lineup. I like Hogard, but I think I would prefer to play Woodland on this track over Hogard. It might be minuscule, but just the history Woodland has, he's been more consistent driving accuracy and distance off the tee, and his irons have been not as good, but good enough. I think there's a little more consistency to be had with Woodland if I was building a team by hand than Hogard. Let's see here. Ryan Gerard looks pretty good across the board. And then Celinda, but I imagine that's limited sample size. He's been pretty good. I probably would take a shot on Celinda again at 7,100. Grayson Sigg has terrible course history, so I won't recommend him. He's 7,100, but stats look good. This should be a good course for Grayson Sigg. So I don't know what the problem is. I think he's got a miscut or 2 miscuts, and he's got like a 50th or 60th. So again, just a guy that where you think this would fit him, and it doesn't. And last week, you wouldn't think the Mexico Open would fit him, and I don't think it does, but he plays really well there. It might just be the longer irons. I'm not sure. But obviously distance isn't the reason. Okay, down into the 6K range, or I'm sorry, 2 more in the 7K range. I have Joel Damon and Joe Highsmith. I actually like Highsmith a good bit this week. Damon, don't mind, but the dude is known to be, spike and then just completely implode. I like Joel Damon, just saying we've seen this before where he'll have a really good event, think maybe there's something there, and it doesn't come to fruition. So Joel Damon, worth mentioning. And then Joe Highsmith, I actually like quite a bit. I think it's a great golf course for Joe Highsmith. Let's see. Jesper Svensson, will be in the player pool. We're in the 6K range, by the way. We're almost done with the show. Gone on some tangents and talked through, a few highlighted players. Yeah, Jesper Svensson. So he's very good off the tee. He's a longer hitter, but his irons have been good. So again, I'm not going to knock him for off the tee. His irons have been good. Again, I would still look at, even though his irons look good, I would still pull him into the approach IQ to kind of narrow it down on those distances from the fairway, obviously. Or you could do the par threes too if you really want to be a nit over it. But I think, again, just thinking through what I want to see for my players, off the tee is good, approach is good, but I think I really still want to focus in on those specific distances and not just wedges or really, really long irons from last week, and see where I can gain an edge. Rosner was pretty popular last week. I'll probably just go back to him here. I'm not exactly sure he's good at golf yet, but he does look good with his irons, look good in Spectrum last week. He looks good in our stat model. So at 6,800, you might as well go to him. Quade Cummins looks pretty good putter, but hasn't been putting on Bermuda, so I'd have to look at his splits. But his iron's actually been good. Spectrum likes him more than what strokes gained shows, and then off the tee has been good. We have Toasty, who is actually a UF. I don't know if he graduated, but he went to the University of Florida, so he should be comfortable on Bermuda. Very poor putting performances year to date, but fantastic off the tee and fantastic with his iron. So Alejandro Toasty, probably a really good first-round bet as well. Hisatsuni. I will give AWOL Kid, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, another shout-out because of the Le Golf National. Hisatsuni is a winner at Le Golf National and looks good coming into this week. I think that's a really sneaky play. I hope it's a sneaky play. His stats look pretty good for the 6K range, but that Le Golf National connection makes a lot of sense. So, Hisatsuni, that's the name. Keep him in your pool. I might play him in single entry, to be honest. 6,600, like get one good punt off. Yeah, I like that option. All right, anybody else in the 6K range as we go down? We talked about Nick Hardy, but he cannot putt worth a lick. I think that's kind of a fool's errand, to be honest. It's really tough. I'm trying to add in the splits to the player profile. So what I would do is literally just click his name or pull up the sheet that I put in the Discord yesterday and see if there's any indication that Bermuda putting is going to be better than the last couple of months of basically POA, Paspalum, and that's it. Otherwise, he is almost dead last in this field in putting, and that's not going to you could probably survive. You probably could survive. But if now your irons dip a little bit, you're not getting up and down for par because you're not making your 5 or 6 footers, you're screwed. So I think that is going to be it for this show. Yeah. I know we rattled off quite a few names in there, but there are a lot of guys that are worth mentioning to look into further or, worth just keeping in your player pool in MME. So the other housekeeping notes I'll mention is under the PGA data tab. Sim results is not up yet. I'm still working on that. I was working on some other tools like the Approach IQ. That's on the list. And then field projections is up. So right now it's blank. You can go there. When I run our FGB sims, this will populate with the fantasy points and the standard deviation and the projected ownership. So you can find our field projections, DFS projections basically, in that tab for pro members. And then you can export it, upload it, do whatever you want to do. But I think that's it, guys. I appreciate you tuning in as always. A lot of guys have hopped into the Discord and have re-signed up with Fantasy Golf Bag after, a 2-year hiatus. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's always tough. I enjoy making these tools, so it's not as tough for me because I would use these anyways. And to me, it's fun thinking through ideas and then kind of making them happen. But I do appreciate people putting trust in me to make the tools and then use the tools. It's that obviously goes a long way. So appreciate everybody that did, rejoin. And hopefully we have more to come as we go into the Masters in the major season, the real golf season. Florida swing is the real golf season. Let's be honest. But yeah, I appreciate everybody coming back, and appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. If you guys don't mind, you can hit a rating, hit a like, do whatever you got to do. But I really appreciate everybody. The support has been great. So we'll keep it going. A lot of stuff in store for Fantasy Golf Bag I'm excited about. So best of luck this week. And yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you later this week in the Discord or on the site. And hopefully we see you at the top of the leaderboards. That'd be fun. All right. See ya.